tough and she's smart and she's highly analytical. And yet, despite that, over the years, she has earned the trust of the very highest commanding heights of our national economy and has had ready access to the corridors of power. So the fact is, by vocation, by education, by social class, Diane runs with the big dogs. The titans of big business, the machers in big government. So when I decided to do a more careful study of the impact of digital disruption on these two essential, fundamental, iconic, and sometimes vilified parts of our national experience, the finance world and the resource extraction world, I thought I would turn to her for some advice. And as she began to give me this advice, the more she spoke, the more I realized that maybe she should be the one presenting this afternoon's lineup. So no sooner did I have that thought than I had another thought, which is people are always asking me, so how's it going? Are you enjoying the conference? And it's hard when you're doing it to actually get a sense of it. You're too busy doing it. You're too busy worrying about the next thing. And that gave me the confirming thought that maybe I should get Diane to take on the rest of this afternoon's schedule. And so I asked her, I said, would you, in addition to being a speaker, like to become the impresario, the ringmaster? And she said yes. So this is Diane Francis. Come on out here. So Diane, this is the hammer.
Uh-oh.
And you are now in charge.
I'm not going to do that to
I'll put it
anybody.
down.
I am not. Maybe to Conrad Black, but not to anybody else. Wow, this is great. Isn't he super? It's unbelievable. The guy's amazing. Labor of love. Well, I'm here to talk to you about disruption initially, and then we're going to have some terrific speakers following me that I'll introduce, hopefully elegantly. But I want to talk about my own personal disruption, and we've all heard about it, but I was disrupted as a journalist. In fact, newspapers were disrupted in the year 2004 when Google began to steal our content and then proceeded to steal our advertisers. 13 years later, there's not a newspaper that isn't on life support or a rich man's plaything or government-owned. Networks are also going to find that they're going to be hit hard with mobile advertising, and the television ad sales are collapsing. So the networks are going to be hit just as the newspapers have been hit. The unemployment in newsrooms in the United States is 50%. That's much more than the Depression. So most of us have been entrepreneurial, like myself. I was fortunate enough to be at the point where I could just go off into the sunset, which I was going to do anyway. But I have been an entrepreneur, and so I've gone into other things. And I've followed my nose and my interests and my curiosity. So I find myself very immersed in the financial, tech, fintech, and the tech space globally. So I speak at a lot of conferences about tech. I curate conferences about tech. I'm attached to Singularity University. I'm on several boards of startups in Silicon Valley, and I am now a software developer, working on a tool that I think hopefully will change the world. That's media related. So that's what I've done, and that's what everybody's going to have to do. Nobody escapes unscathed from disruption. And it's going to happen. It happens more quickly than you think. And it's very hard for us to remember when there wasn't email and there wasn't a smartphone. And that's legitimate, not because our memories are failing, but because these things are happening faster and faster. Acceleration is accelerating. And I'm going to give you a quick slide presentation to show you what I've learned in talking to the gurus and so on of Silicon Valley that I know, like Ray Kurzweil, who's one of the founders of Singularity, or Peter Diamandis. And I'm going to tell you what I want you to understand about what's going on right now. This is about exponential thinking. I'm also going to connect dots about tech and things that you've heard. So I'm going to be a little repetitive here, but I do want you to understand that you better know this is coming at you faster in every sector, every country, profession than you can possibly imagine. Kind of scary, but that's the facts. When we were cavemen, we were wired to think linearly. Linear means, is there a tiger on the savannah? What do I see? And what tree can I climb in case I see it galloping toward me to eat me? And that's kind of what we are wired for. But exponential thinking is completely different. The difference is, if I take 30 steps, 1 meter a step linearly, I will end up 30 meters away. If I take 30 steps exponentially, doubling every step, I'm 1 billion 30 steps away. And all information technologies, exponential technologies, are accelerating and developing on an exponential basis. That's why it's happening so quickly. Moore's Law, you've heard about. Ray Kurzweil looked at Moore's Law. Moore's Law is basically that in technology, every 18 months, the price of something is cut at least in half, and its intensity or its effectiveness is doubled every 18 months, and that's exponential, so the doubling and doubling. Here you can see the difference, and what he prophesies is that in the next we won't see 100 years of progress in the next century, we'll see 20,000 years of advance. May not always be advance, but it'll be different. And so you can see here the enormous, this is Moore's Law. Look at the difference in the statistic and the specifications of that technology alone. It's happening in all technologies. This is the digital camera, which was invented by Kodak. The board of directors was given a presentation. It was going to be a $10,000 digital camera. That's the guy who invented it. The board rejected it. They invented it. It put them out of business years later. Why did they reject it? They said, well, we're not in the camera business. We're in the film development business. They were right, and they were wrong. The GPS. That's something that we have baked into just about every device we have, and look at the difference in just that many years of the size and the cost. Your smartphone, and the reason why this has happened, and the heart of all of this happening is in the United States and will remain so, sorry to say, is that smartphone in today's dollars represents $1 trillion investment by American taxpayers in developing weapons and systems and computers for the military and the space program. $1 trillion of investment. And Stephen Jobs, who couldn't even write code, was a brilliant industrial designer who repurposed all the stuff that he knew, because he grew up in the Valley, could be miniaturized, made lighter, cheaper, and put into a beautiful computer product. He wasn't a techie. The greatest inventor in the century was not a tech. He was a designer. But he knew what tech could do. Software is eating the media. Associated Press, Yahoo Sports are now publishing stories that are written by algorithms. That's just the beginning. Software is eating the world of show business. At the top is a picture of one of the biggest rock stars in Japan. It's a hologram. Has millions of fans, Twitter followers. 5 of the big 10 Hollywood blockbuster movies at any given time are animated, totally software. Frozen was a movie created by 500 software developers. All of these things, it's kind of reminiscent, it's hard to imagine the yellow page. Remember the yellow pages? Remember portable radios? Remember the old video cam? All these things now are in our $1 trillion smartphone. All these things will be in our phone or in some other form accessible to us The library, cars, we won't own cars, we just summon a car. We may even speak to a headset that's implanted in our ear or something to order something. Banking will be disrupted, is being disrupted. Right now, there are 16,000 fintech startups in Silicon Valley. I'm on the board of 2 of them. They're going to take apart the banking system in the next 10 or 15 years. Whether it's stock market trading or wealth management or loan or credit ratings or replacing the credit card with a very cheap rate of interest or remittance payments. They're about that business. At the end of jobs is a famous Oxford University report that said what it says. Don't get too frightened, because many of these jobs will just be enhanced by tech or changed by tech, not necessarily completely replaced. But this is a big issue as artificial intelligence becomes more pervasive. Watson is the ultimate artificial intelligence aptitude right now. There will be other AIs that are just as important that'll be developed as time goes on, but this thing is just unbelievable. And I don't know how many of you saw the Jeopardy show. I would, if you didn't see it, win Jeopardy, which is a very complicated game with a strange way of asking questions that requires a huge amount of general interest knowledge and is based on puns and nuance and natural language understanding that we never thought a machine like this could do. It is quite breathtaking. And you can go on YouTube and see Watson, see a couple of the sample questions that Watson could answer in split seconds. And they trained Watson by feeding in the entire Wikipedia, 5 years of periodical headlines from around the world into that machine. It ate it in 2 weeks, total recall, pattern recognition algorithms, and probability algorithms so that it could spit out an answer better than the 2 best players ever in less than a second. Now Watson is being used to diagnose cancer, to do tax returns. It's being repurposed in any way, shape, or form. And you can buy pieces of Watson and include them in the goods and services that you now make yourself. The bots, we saw about the bots. They're cute. They're pretty stupid, though. Thank heavens. Drones, flying robots. We know all about that. That's the small package drone that'll end up being used by Amazon and Alibaba to deliver packages to us in medicines and parts. That little tiny thing is a spy. It's actually used by the CIA now. It flies around in a room unnoticed, and it records and videos everything. That's what I mean. It's all a military basis, all this stuff. Photovoltaic, that is the curve of cost collapse for photovoltaic cells, i.e. solar cells. The solar tipping point was reached last year. That is that in the United States, without subsidies, in sunny areas, solar is cheaper, as cheap as any other fossil fuel. And it's going to keep going down. Ray Kurzweil thinks that by 2030, solar cells will be virtually free, just like the little GPS thing, a dime a piece and much more powerful. What needs to happen for solar to replace fossil fuels is the battery. There's a big race on developing the battery. Bill Gates is on one hand, Musk is on the other. There are other groups trying to create a battery so that when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow, you can store the power that you generated when you got more than you needed for when you don't have it. That way everybody can be off-grid. And many countries are moving very quickly toward that. That's a way away. Solar promises abundance. The Arab states, Saudi Arabia says the last drop of oil will be produced in 2050, and they are going solar to the tune of $250 million every year. So are the Emirates. You say, well, why would energy-rich countries be going solar? They have some of the biggest solar farms in the world. Because when solar scales, it gets cheaper, and the S-curve that applies to all exponential technologies will make it more powerful, And California is doing the same thing very quickly, sunny area with lots of oil and lots of resources. But the real secret behind solar becoming so cheaply is you can desalinate the oceans. You have unlimited water for agriculture. And that's also what the Saudis are looking at, and the Arab nations and California. We talked about life sciences and synthetic biology yesterday, fascinating sessions. This is the one that's going to raise the most moral and ethical issues, there's no doubt about it. And, you know, Moses referred to the CRISPR method, and this is basically where you just click and drag out genes that are going to do you harm. And they can already do it, they're experimenting with it, but as this becomes more and more pervasive, there's a lot of problems that could be attached to it. There's also a lot of wonderful benefits. That people that are already alive could have their genes edited through gene engineering and eliminate those genes that we're finding out cause cancers or a proclivity toward depression or whatever the problem is, Alzheimer's. These are the hopes of this kind of genetic engineering, and that's the goal of the life sciences. Life sciences is also going to skate us on side. You saw the presentations about the future of food. There are now laboratories not only working to create artificial meat, as we saw demonstrated, but there are others that are actually taking a biopsy from a pig, taking the stem cells out and growing its muscle only. So you'll have real meat without the body, and it'll come from a live animal. Cloning, widespread, more widely spread than you understand. There is the best sniffer dog that the DEA ever had, so they decided to have 5 more. So they cloned her. There's a company in Korea that does it. It's $100,000 an animal, guaranteed success, or they'll redo it. I don't want to go there. Argentina, dairy cows are being cloned as a matter of course. Championship dairy cows. China is doing a massive amount of cloning of important livestock. 3D printing, you've heard a little bit about that. This is the first house about 1.5 years ago that was printed from leftover building materials. It's a house. It's a 2-bedroom house in China, 3D printed. You heard about virtual reality. I think we will all be walking around with headsets on. Bad hair days, forever. Doesn't appeal to me, but I'm sure it will. And these are some of the major transformations that I can mention to you that I think are happening. And I would assume that the slides will be available for people who want them from ideacity afterward. I certainly have no problem sharing these. So it's coming faster than you can imagine, so hold on to your seatbelts. Thank you.